The Walking Dead is a television show that first aired in 2010, based on the comic book of the same name. We open on a police car rolling up, and out steps Rick Grimes, our protagonist. He's looking for some gas, and shoots a little girl who had picked up a teddy bear, which is something the zombies would occasionally do in the first season, and last, which I'm sure was planned from the very beginning, just like the Horcruxes. The next scene flashes back to pre-apocalypse. Rick is talking to his loyal best buddy Shane about women not being able to turn off light switches. Rick then talks about his issues with his wife to his super best buddy who would never sleep with her, even if he thought Rick was dead. Not even then. They're then called to a high-speed chase. They arrive at the scene and they lay down a spiky long thing that'll pop the tires. A spike strip, okay? I thought it would. That's so obvious. Anyway, the car hits it and crashes. Rick and the boys have a bit of a shootout. Rick is hit, but it's just a graze. He gets up and is fine. Shane is very relieved. But then, bam, surprise, extra shooter. He shoots Rick straight into a coma. He eventually wakes up from said coma and finds that the world has up and changed on him. And Rick's gonna learn that the Walking Dead ain't no laughing matter. Anyway, he leaves the hospital because there's a half-eaten elderly woman on the floor and goes outside. He spies a woman with no legs, so he steals her bicycle. But then she comes back to life, and this is Rick's first encounter with a zombie. He naturally freaks the hell out and rides all the way home to discover his family isn't there. He sits out the front of his house, feeling pretty down. He is then hit in the head with a shovel by an African American child. As Rick loses consciousness, he says, "Carl, I found you," mistaking the child for his son, because even though Rick has just woken up from a coma, is dehydrated, doesn't know if his family is alive or dead, and stole a bike from a half-lady, Rick still doesn't see race. It turns out the boy wasn't Carl at all, but the son of Morgan, a fellow survivor who brings Rick back to his house. Once Rick awakes, Morgan tells him all about the zombie situation, and Rick agrees that it isn't good. Morgan's wife is a zombie. This happened after they were married though, and he is having trouble killing her when she wanders by the house every now and then. Anyway, Rick decides to take them down to his old police station and gives them some guns, and they part ways. Goodbye Morgan, goodbye African American Carl. Rick heads off in search of his beloved best friend Shane and his wife and son. We cut back to Morgan, who is sitting upstairs at his house, his rifle aimed out the window, struggling to kill his wife, who is wandering the street outside. He spots her but can't pull the trigger. Rick makes a quick stop to return the half-lady's bicycle. He decides to put her out of her misery. Rick is then driving along trying to contact anyone on the radio as he makes his way into Atlanta. A group of survivors just outside of the city hear the call but can't reply.
Hi.
It turns out Shane, Rick's wife Laurie, and his son Carl are amongst the group. Laurie wants to put up signs warning people away from the city, as it is full of zombies, but Shane says no, because all the zombies and whatnot. Laurie gets upset and wanders off. Shane follows her and tells her she can't be wandering off because she might be killed, just like they assume Rick has been. They then rub their mouths together to make sure neither one of them is infected. This is something they often do to ensure they are not tempted to bite each other, which is what zombies are commonly known to do. Good job, guys. Rick's car runs out of gas, so he finds a horse and rides on into Atlanta. It seems rather quiet to begin with, but then it isn't. Then there's lots of zombies. So Rick hides in a tank and his horse gets brutally eaten alive. He then hears a call on the radio. It's Glenn. He helps guide people out of the tank, but Rick mostly, and into a building where the rest of his gang are hiding safely. It's here we meet Andrea. She points a gun at Rick and blames him for drawing attention to the group's location. And T-Dog, he's also in the group. Then we meet Merle. He's causing issues for the group and does not like taking orders from anyone. T-Dog confronts him about this and Merle does a racism and then beats him up. Rick then hits Merle and handcuffs him to a pipe. Rick tells Merle about how racism isn't even good and stuff. Merle disagrees. Rick and Glenn then decide to cover their bodies in zombie blood and guts to blend in with the zombies because they're all smelly and stuff. They then get a van and take everyone back to Survivors Camp. Mel doesn't get to come. Meanwhile, back at the Survivors Camp, we're introduced to some of the other members of the group. Dale is keeping lookout from the top of his RV. He's the moral compass of the group. Laurie wanders off into the wilderness again. Shane shows up and they begin inspecting each other's bodies for zombie bites, and inside each other's bodies. They can't find any, so they become angry and moan loudly, because they're angry. Soon after, Rick and the gang make it back to camp. Rick steps out of the van and spots his family. Carl sees his father and begins running towards him. They are finally reunited, and it's a pretty nice little moment. Andrea is also reunited with her sister, Amy. Anyway, the next day, Daryl is introduced, Merle's brother, who is rather disappointed they left him for dead on top of a building. Rick decides to go back for Merle because he also left some guns there. So Rick, T-Dog, Glenn and Daryl head off in the van to rescue Merle. Okay, there's a bunch of new people now, so let's do a quick recap of all the characters so far. First of all, we've got Rick, his wife Laurie and his son Carl. Then of course we have Shane, his wife Laurie and his son Carl. Glenn, Andrea and her sister Amy, Dale and his RV, Daryl and Merle, Carol, her abusive husband Ed and daughter Sophia, T-Dog, Jackie, Jim Morales and his family, and various non-speaking background fillers. Okay, back to it. Shane takes Carl down to the quarry to teach him how to catch frogs. He then beats the crap out of Carol's abusive husband and everyone cheers, or at least they should have. Meanwhile, the rescue gang finds Merle's hand. This upsets Daryl because he was hoping to find a complete Merle. Andrea and her sister are in a boat in the quarry, and I'll start drawing her normally now. Anyway, they're talking about their dad and knots and something. We then cut to Dale on the top of his RV watching Jim dig graves for all the soon-to-be dead people. This includes you, Amy. Meanwhile, the gang are arguing over Mel's hand. It is then unanimously voted that Daryl gets to keep it. So they continue on the journey in search of his other parts. They are not found until season 3, but they search anyway. They soon come across a young kid who starts yelling, so Daryl hits him. His buddies then show up and kidnap Glenn, so Daryl and the gang kidnap the yelling kid. They take the yelling kid back to wherever they were hanging out, and Daryl throws his Mel hand at him. The kid agrees and takes them back to his gang's headquarters for an old-fashioned Glenn swapperoo. The gang swaps the kid for one Glenn. Daryl asks if they have any Mel parts. They do not. They return to the van to find that Mel has stolen it and filled it with zombies to take back to the camp. This is a bad gift. By the time they run back to the place, zombies have already eaten a few people. Ed, Amy, and some non-speaking background characters. Tell my wife, shh, you don't have any lines. Oh. They kill the rest of the zombies and save the day. Except for poor Amy and less poor Ed. Andrea is having a bit of trouble getting over her dead sister, which people often do. She is sitting by her corpse that could turn at any moment. Anyway, Rick approaches her. "You all right, buddy?" Andrea turns and points her gun at Rick. "I know how the safety works," which is something from earlier that I forgot to mention when Rick was like, "The safety's on your gun. This is how you turn it off," and yeah, not terribly important. The rest of the gang are picking up corpses. Some guy drags a body towards the zombie body fire, and Glenn's like, "We don't burn them, we bury them," referring to the bodies of their friends. It's then discovered that poor Jim has been bitten. The gang decide they can't stay at the quarry due to irregular zombie attacks. Shane wants to go to Fort Benning because they might have an army and guns and stuff. Rick wants to go to the CDC because they might have a cure for Jim. Amy eventually turns, so Andrea shoots her in the head. It's pretty sad. "I'm Andrea." What is wrong with me? She's not that bad. Anyway, Rick and Shane decide to go do a sweep of the area. They get into an argument over whether they should go to Fort Benning or the CDC. Shane gets angry and tells Rick he looked after his family while he was gone and regularly checked Laurie's body for signs of infection and inside her body. Rick thanks him and they hug and kiss a little.
We love each other.
Shane then scans the area with his gun and points it at Rick for a moment. Dale sees him do this. Shane then tells him he was just checking Rick for signs of infection. After this, Shane decides to go with Rick's plan, so they head off. During the trip, Jim decides he wants to die under a tree, so they leave him. "You're free now, Jim. Run home, little buddy." They arrive at the CDC. There's bodies and whatnot everywhere. They make their way to the entrance. It looks abandoned. The gang tells Rick they should all leave before they draw attention. Rick spots a camera and starts yelling at it.
"You're killing us."
The doors eventually open and it fades to white. They enter the CDC. Dr. Edwin Jenner greets them and lets them all in, and also makes them take a blood test or whatever. He has a talking AI computer and no friends and dead wife. Jenna gives them some food and wine, and Rick gives Carl a sip to try. He doesn't like it. "Don't worry, buddy. Maybe you'll like it more when you're older." Anyway, Shane asks Jenna what happened to everyone. Jenna explains that all the staff left and he's the only one that stayed. He then offers them a nice use of the facilities, and they all have a nice hot shower. And Shane has a sad crying drunk shower. Andrea just has a crying one. Rick then goes to drunkenly talk to Jenna, and Shane tries to non-consensually check Laurie's body for signs of infection, and I'm still not sure if I'm comfortable with this joke. The next morning they all have breakfast. Then Jenna shows them some research about the virus and stuff. Sophia asks if that's what happened to Jim. Who? Dale spots a clock that is counting down. He asks Jenna what is it doing. He explains that's when generators run out and the whole facility will blow up. So the gang decide to leave. Andrea wants to stay because she wants to be with Amy. Dale tries to convince her to leave, but she won't. So Dale says he won't leave either unless she does. So she reluctantly decides to leave. They all run outside and it explodes. They hit the road again, in search of adventure and more mysteries to solve in The Walking Dead.